8:38, Friday, December 15th. Great to have you here. 866-660-5759. As we wind up the week, we always like to hit by the end of the Friday show, we'd like to feel that we hit the things, most of the things, if not all of them, that are important to know. And in what's been a really busy week of news, and a lot of it political news, there's something that might have slipped by you. And so I want to get you hip to something that is a wonderful development and talk to a lady who has a lot to do with seeing to it that more good things like this happen in Texas. School libraries. We've had quite the focus on school libraries, haven't we? School libraries are going to have policies to prohibit the presence, the possession or purchase of books that are determined to be sexually explicit. Now, the first thing, when I mention this, and there have been a lot of folks behind this, Representative Jared Patterson out of Frisco was a key part of calling for the approval of standards just like this. I know. How sad is it? How really pathetic is it that we even need attention to this? Sexually explicit things on school shelves? How did that even happen? And there are two answers. One is sort of sins of omission and sins of commission. There's some people who actively want them there, and they try to enshroud them in the force field of LGBTQ plus stuff where kids need to know about things like this. And look, by the time you're deep into high school, there are issues of human sexuality that need to be discussed in some, if it's even possible, objective and authoritative way. But the kind of stuff that's available to middle schoolers that is not just propaganda, but graphic propaganda, oh, no. And it's there because some people absolutely want it there. And it's there because sometimes school libraries just buy a million different things and don't pay enough attention to what they're buying. Mary Elizabeth Castle is the Director of Government Relations with our friends at Texas Values, and we had a really nice development this past week on libraries and what they're going to have to do to be a little more vigilant about things like this. Mary Elizabeth, how you doing?
Doing great, and so happy about the good news this week at the State Board of Education.
It is. Tell everybody just in a paragraph exactly what was before the board and what their decision was.
Well, for the first time, we have actual standards that are put in place to make sure that librarians choose books that are correct with parental standards. You've heard across the country that there have been this problem of pornographic, sexually explicit books making it in the library and being in the hands of very young kids. Well, because of that, and we decided to pass a bill in the legislative session, HB 900, that would put standards in place to make sure that there's actually a process librarians and libraries have to go through before they accept books on their shelves, keeping those sexually inappropriate books out. And the State Board of Education just took a major step in approving those standards. That'll be accepted by the Library Association this week. And so we will, for the first time starting next year, have a system in place to keep those pornographic books off of school library shelves.
And how is that supposed to go? Because I've heard various versions that were being knocked around, and some of them involve the publishers themselves kind of labeling their own stuff. I mean, tell me how the judgment will be cast upon any given book.
Right. So the bill had several provisions to tackle the issue in different ways. One provision was having the library standards that libraries would have to use in order to make sure that the books are up to par and aren't sexually explicit. But there was also a provision of the bill that would have vendors themselves rate the books based on their sexually explicit nature, whether they're sexually relevant material or sexually inappropriate material. Now, that provision of the bill was taken to court. There was a lawsuit by some book vendors here in Austin, Texas, and they filed a lawsuit against that provision because they said it was too much of a burden for them to rate their own books.
It's also a little weird. I mean, because if I'm a vendor and it's like, okay, time for me to rate this book I'm trying to sell, I'm going to rate it in a way that increases the likelihood of it being sold, wouldn't I?
You know, that's a great point. I think the idea behind this bill, though, was, you have movies and you have even the music industry who, because of pressure by Congress, several decades ago, decided to rate their own music. And they did that willingly in order to increase sales amongst adults so they weren't, basically blocking out these musical artists or these, movie producers, but they were complying with it so they could still have that market for adults, but make sure that it wasn't in kids' hands. So that was the idea behind having this rating system. However, I believe that what happened this week at the State Board of Education, having the library standards where we're actually holding librarians accountable for what they actually buy and put on shelves, that's a good standard to have in place.
That does seem better. And from the vendors, I guess no vendor would want to be tagged as someone who is falsely sugarcoating material just in order to get it before children. That would probably not be a good PR move. But it is better that libraries, librarians, that the schools themselves take a look at everything that's coming in, evaluate it, and they pass judgment on what they think is appropriate and what's not. Is there a school librarian listening who says, dude, you guys have no idea how many squillions of books we take in, that job is just too vast? And what do we tell them?
Yeah, so the way the standards are put in place, it makes it clear and makes it accessible for librarians to review the books, but it also gives power to a parent to also look at the materials as well. So if anything is flagged, then that will also be brought to the attention of the school librarian as well. So there are many mechanisms in place to make sure that it is an easy process. It won't be, simple, and it won't, take only a day, but there definitely are systems in place within these standards to make sure that it's easier to track down these inappropriate books. And at this point, so many of these inappropriate sexually explicit books have been on the news, and they've gained notoriety in a bad way, like genderqueer, that a librarian should automatically know some of these books are sexually explicit.
Yeah, and in fact, that has been, it's been a little awkward and tricky, but I've loved it because the now famous practice of a parent striding to the microphone during open session comment time at any small or large city in America's school board and say, the point I'd like to make, let me read to you from page 47 of this particular book that is on my kid's library shelf. And it is so explicit and so graphic that they have to shut down the parent, and that local TV stations covering it could not air what the parent said. Hello, isn't that de facto evidence that there's stuff in these books that shouldn't be there?
Yeah, that's perfect. I think getting parents to be bold and going before school board meetings has really been the turning point, and getting legislation like this passed and getting the State Board of Education to accept these standards. And I'm really loving how parents are being more aware of what their children are bringing home or what they're reviewing in the classroom. And overall, there's a movement in Texas to make sure we have that transparency when it comes to library books, but also textbooks as well. And we're trying to increase that transparency. Some people may forget, but former Representative Matt Krause actually published a list of hundreds of books that he found to be inappropriate in the state of Texas. So we do have those resources available for parents to know what's out there and to be aware of these sexually explicit books hiding in their kids' libraries.
When these stories are covered, the objectors will often try to invoke, 1930s Germany, and these are book bannings. They're banning it first. So here's a simple rule: no book is banned if you can get it on Amazon. No book is banned if it's at a bookstore. The only place we're saying it can't exist is in front of your 12-year-old. So what's the best answer to people who will come after efforts like yours and say, you guys are trying to, repress, free exchange of ideas and are banning books?
Well, our Constitution in constitutional law, and our Supreme Court has always made a distinction when materials are obscene and when they shouldn't be in front of children. What we're doing is making sure age-appropriate materials are in front of children. We know there are detrimental effects of children looking at porn or sexually explicit materials at a young age that lead to complications later on as adults. We're just making sure that we're protecting kids. And of course, this is not about the First Amendment. This is about protecting kids and making sure that what's happening in the schoolhouse is age appropriate and helping them develop and learn as a child.
So last thing, What do you think the landscape looks like as we head into 2024? We have countless, scores and scores of school boards where a lot of this is getting attention. The State Board of Education, you'd like to think that a Texas State Board of Education would be vigilant, and it seems with this vote that they are. Is this something where the awareness campaign has worked and where things are kind of moving in a sensible way, or do we still have hills to climb?
I think parents are becoming more actively aware of the different parts and the different players who are involved in their child's education. Texas Values has been involved at the State Board of Education for over a decade, but even getting parents to be aware that, hey, there's an elected board at the state level who is determining curriculum and different standards. I think we're trying to still get parents to be active at the state level. School boards are important locally, of course, because they have local control, but it's very important for parents to know the different players and how different levels of government work in their child's education. So I think it's very important that they pay attention to who's running for school board, but also State Board of Education, because those elections are coming up as well.
Mary Elizabeth Castle is the Director of Government Relations for our friends at Texas Values, txvalues.org. Love hanging out with you guys. Love everything you do. It was a pleasure to be with you at the dinner, the luncheon the other day, in DFW. Hang out with Jonathan and everybody. Just a joy. And you were broadly and deservedly recognized at that event. And it's wonderful to have you on. And we look forward to talking to you some more in 24.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you. Mary Elizabeth Castle, Director of Government Relations for our friends at Texas Values, 849.